Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
So, a very good morning to all of you. Now, we are moving to the fourth lecture of sixth week, and here we have been talking about review, discussion and analysis of performance. You remember we talked about the basic concepts related to performance review, then we moved on to the process, that how performance is reviewed, and then after performance review how we are going to discuss the performance, right. When you are going to discuss the performance of an individual or group, what you are going to see that during this process you are going to identify those factors which has emerged either as a facilitating factors or inhibiting factors, right. So, the basic objective of performance analysis is to identify first the level of performance that is achieved, second why this level of performance was achieved, and in this discussion of why this level of performance was achieved, we try to find out the factors which are responsible for achieving that particular level of performance, right. So, this is actually a part of the discussion only. So, here also we will continue our discussion on performance review and discussion, and see that how performance is analyzed to identify those factors. So, when we are going to talk about performance analysis, basically you have to see that what does it mean. Okay. Basically, when we are looking at performance, so the first thing that we have to see that what does it mean, what are the factors which constitute performance, right. Since you are going through a process in performance management, so you have to see that at which level this analysis happens, right. For example, you try to set an environment for analysis, then you try to monitor the performance, then you also see that what are the things that he has done, both the task and the contextual performance. Then you also look at the data and then you try to compare it with the various metrics that you have, right. And then you see that whether the performance level have been achieved or not, at whatever performance has been achieved by the individual, and based on that you are going to rate him as good, bad or whatever it is, right. And you prepare a report which is submitted to the HR managers for record and also taking certain decisions, right. So, whatever decisions that is taken on the basis of performance report, we will discuss that in the next topic. Here we will look into some of the issues related to analysis. So, once you are able to identify the various components of performance that we have seen, then you have to see that what causes this performance, right. So, the basic idea analysis is identifying the reasons for achieving a specific level of performance, right. And it could be done with anybody, it could be done with individuals, groups, teams or even organizations. So, but in each case you need to identify what is the accountability, what is the standard, what are the goals that is to be achieved. So, you need to identify the criteria against which you are going to measure the performance, and then once you measure the performance, after the evaluation prepare a record, you discuss it with the subordinate. You see that during the discussion you also try to analyze the reasons for whatever level of performance has been achieved by the individual, whether it is good or bad, right. So, basically analysis talks about the quality of performance, whether it is achieved that particular level of performance or not. You remember in the beginning itself we try to define performance, and we say that it is based on the multiplication of a number of factors like ability, effort, motivation and the support that you are getting from the organization, right, and also the chance factor. Sometimes you are lucky enough, environmental factors are supportive to you. So, your performance is good, otherwise not. And I also told you that if any of these components become 0, then your performance is not going to be effective, right. So, now you have understood that all these 3 components or 4 components that we have is required for an effective performance. Now, when we come to analysis, we need to identify whether these factors are there or not, because they are the determinants, right. So, we are not concerned with the outcome. In the process, what actually happens when we are going to analyze this, we look into these things, that what are the determinants of performance. Right, and these determinants decide basically the level of performance. Right. So, when I am talking about these determinants, okay, and this level of performance is measured against set standards that have been identified, okay, and based on that you are going to provide a rating whether the performance is good or bad, right. Okay. So, when we are talking about these determinants of the performance, this comes from these factors that I have been talking about, like ability, how much effort you put in, that depends upon the motivation level, right. Then support system that is there, okay, including your supervisors, because that is another important factor. Then also luck or chance factor, that is related to the environment, right, which is related to the environment. So, there could be a lot of determinants. Okay. So, if you want to conduct an analysis of performance, you need to identify the extent to which these factors have been able to contribute to your performance, right. Then here you are using level of performance. How we are going to do it? Measuring it against the certain standards. So, you are going to measure the performance. Then here you are going to compare the performance with expected performance, right. So, set standards are used to measure, and that is how you come to know about the gap in the performance level, if there is any. If it is not, that is all right, and based on this measurement you are going to identify the level of the ratings, that is whether the performance is outstanding, good, bad, average, or whatever it is, right. So, in this part, in this lecture, basically we are going to focus more on that how we are going to identify and how we are going to measure these factors and their relative contribution, okay, in determining the performance of an individual, right. So, the idea here is not to look at it so in isolation, but see that how all these factors have been able to contribute to the performance of the individual, right, including environment, right. When we are talking about support, whether it is positive or negative or even chance factor, that is related to the environment, so it, right. Now, so why we are going for doing this exercise, right. As I told you that by analyzing the performance, you will be able to determine those factors which have helped you to achieve a specific level of performance, which will be compared with the performance standards which is already in place. So, that we can identify whether your performance is up to the mark or not, and whether you have able to achieve that given target in relation to the key result areas. So, look at the first factor. So, you need to identify those factors which have helped you in achieving the given target, okay, in relation to the KPAs or the key accountability areas or key result areas or whatever you call them. So, it is very important that you remember we talked about KPAs or KRAs. So, we talked about three things if you remember, we talked about KPAs, we talked about goals and objectives, we also talked about the standards against each KPA. So, that is predetermined and pre-specified, because you are going to be compared for your performance related to your result areas, what objectives for each of these result areas are, and what are the standards that you have set, right. So, you are not only going to identify those factors that we have talked about, which are going to help you or facilitate in achieving those performance targets, but you are also going to identify whether these factors have facilitated or not, right. So, you also need to identify what are those factors which have hindered the performance, which have been created some kind of obstacle for your performance. Say for example, the environment is not supportive, or the supervisor is not supportive, right. He is not providing the necessary help, resources and support to do your job effectively, right. Though it could be a part of contextual performance, but as you know the task and contextual performance both are important. Okay. So, it is very important to ensure that all the factors, whether it is related to task or context, are available, so that you are able to perform well. So, you need to identify all kind of factors related to task and contextual performance, and you remember we talked about KRAs, objectives and standards, right. So, using this you identify task performance and contextual performance, and once you are able to identify task and contextual performance, then you proceed further, right. So, it is something like this. First of all, we identify KRAs, or it is also known as KPAs, right. Then we identify objectives, okay. And third thing that we are going to identify is standards. So, it goes in a logical sequence. First you identify the KPAs. So, once you have identified, so for each KPAs you are going to identify the objectives that you have set, and that has to be there has to be a standard, right. Once that is done, the second exercise is what you are going to measure is task and contextual performance, right. So, when I am talking about task and contextual performance, it has to be in relation to this one, okay, right, and that is where you are going to see the results and the behavior, okay, because this is basically related to what you call the result and the behavior, okay. That is what we are going to measure in terms of outcome, right. Now, whatever result and behavior that you have achieved, okay, then you go for analysis, and I try to identify, okay, what are the determinants, what are the factors which have helped or did not help, right. So, both factors you have to identify, those positive factors or negative factors, means those which have facilitated or those have hindered, right. Okay. So, this is the entire process of performance analysis. So, we will discuss some other issues related to this. Okay. So, you identify both facilitating factors and inhibiting factors related to various things. Then you also identify factors which are related to the individual, your supervisor and the top management, because they are going to contribute to your performance. As I told you that some of these factors are related to task performance, some of them are related to your contextual performance, right. So, you need to identify factors related to your task performance as well as your contextual performance. For example, when you say reporting officer or the support from the top management, it could be a part of contextual performance. But when you are talking about the knowledge and skill base of individual, which could be related to the task performance, because in order to perform a job, you require a set of skills and abilities, right. So, we are measuring both, and then we also identify what are the factors which are going to help you, right. Then you also identify the development needs of the people, okay, especially related to these key result areas where you are working. Okay. So, if you are able to analyze performance on these criteria, basically the idea is that you make the individual or the subordinate understand that what he is doing in terms of tasks, what kind of context would be required in order to perform well. So, that both the behavior and result that is measured at a later stage meet the performance standards, right. And once you are able to analyze this performance during the review and discussion process, then you are going to share it with the employees, so that both of them are able to understand what is required, what is expected from them, and they are going to work it accordingly and develop the action plan, right. And that is why performance analysis is required, we go for it. Now, how do we go about it? As I told you the process when I was making the sketch, that you start with identifying the KPAs, right. Once you are able to identify KPAs, okay, then you identify what are the factors, right, which are related to this in terms of what are the factors which are important for these KPAs, right. And then you identify those factors whether they are related to success or not, which have contributed to the performance, right. So, then you communicate it with your reporting officers and see that these factors are not present. Okay. and then you also look at the gap between the standard and expected achieved performance level, okay. And then you list down all such factors which could be acting either as a facilitating factor or inhibiting factors, right. So, if you look at this process, it is something like this. First of all, you have identified KPIs, right. Say, let us take an example of a bank manager. So, suppose I have already taken this example earlier also. So, I am taking the same example. Say deposit mobilization is, okay. Then we also measure the footfall, okay, in the bank. Then we also measure customer satisfaction, his leadership, because he is supposed to provide leadership to all the people working in the bank, right. Then revenue generation, make sure that you are not going to have so many KPIs, limited to 3 to 4, right. So, here I have kept it 4. So, once you are able to identify these KPIs in case of a branch manager, then you identify the objectives for each of them, right. What does it mean to say to go for deposit mobilization, how much, and for each objectives you are going to have standards, because your performance is going to be compared against this, right. So, you identify specific standards which is to be achieved within a given time frame, that is very important. So, you must keep in mind that performance is evaluated for a specific period. So, identify the time frame against which you are going to meet these standards against these criteria, right. Then your performance is measured, okay, against these criteria, and see whether what is your level of performance. Now, once that is done, you identify the gap, if any is there or not, okay. And based on this level, you also provide a rating to the individual about his performance in terms of good or bad. It is a qualitative assessment that you are going to make, okay. Now, when you are going to discuss this after measurement, when you are going to discuss this level of performance, you try to identify the factors which are associated with success and failures. So, analysis, when we are talking about performance analysis, it focuses on those factors which have contributed to the success or failures of the individual related to the performance, right, which could be related to individual, it could be related to the organization, it could be related to the supervisors, subordinates, environment also. So, there could be a number of factors which have contributed to a performance, right, and that is why in the beginning, as I told you, that the basic idea here is to identify the determinants of the performance and the extent to which each of them have contributed or not to your performance. Okay. So, moving further, we have been talking about it. So, once you have done it, you have been able to identify these factors which are related to performance, then you see that okay, what needs to be done, okay, because that helps you to develop an action plan for sustaining that performance, or if your performance is not good, then how you can overcome those deficiencies related to any of these factors. Okay. Some of them may be in your control, some of them may not be in your control, right. So, you need to identify factors that is within your control and also factors that is not in your control, right. So, then you are going to discuss it with your reporting officer, who could be a supervisor, and once this analysis is done and you have analyzed, listed all such factors which are responsible for your performance, whether they have facilitated or not, you are going to report it to your immediate supervisor, and then he is going to further submit it to the HR officer, right. So, this is the process through which we are going to analyze the performance. Look at this quadrant, right. Now, there are two questions that is moving horizontally and vertically. Now, if you look at the question that is moving vertically, it says that does the employee have adequate job knowledge or not. So, first factor which is very important for your performance is your skill, knowledge and ability, right. And second factor that is related to your performance is your behavior. Does the employee have the appropriate attitude or not, right? And that is what I have been talking about. Your behavior and your skill both are equally important, because skill contributes to your performance as well as your attitude or your behavior also contributes to your performance. Now, if you look at this, there are 4 factors which have been identified. Okay. Now, when you look at these factors, it means given these factors, you can identify while analyzing the performance whether person what is there or what is not there, right. For example, if you find that the person does not have the attitude to perform well, right, then what does it mean? Okay. So, this is going to be moving from low to high on both sides, right. So, if you look at this, right, that is something like this. So, this side you have a skill, right, that is from low to high, and this side you are having behavior, okay, that is from low to high. So, if you have the right kind of attitude and behavior, okay, and you have the skill, right. So, if both of them are high, it means that you are here, right. So, if that is so, then what is required? If you are here, then what is required? Then if you are here, then what is required? If you are here, then what is required, right. Now, suppose we are talking about motivation here, that is there in the quadrant. It means you have the skill, but what is missing is the right kind of attitude. So, you need to be motivated, right. Suppose if you both of them are high, then what you require is the resources, but if the behavior is good, but the skill is not there, then you need to train the people, right. And if both of them are there, then you make sure that you are not going to select such person for the job, because they will not be able to perform well. So, we have 4 things, that is motivation, resources, training and selection. Okay. So, now if you look at this, okay. So, it talks about motivation, selection, it means neither skill nor attitude is there. So, make sure that you are not going to select some people, such people who have this, right. If motivation attitude is there, right kind of behavior is there, but there is a lack of knowledge and skill, then you are going to train the people, right. But if right kind of attitude is not there and person is knowledgeable, he has the skill, then you are going to see that he is motivated enough, right. But if both are present, a positive attitude as well as good knowledge and skill, it means you need to provide resources and support, right, and make sure that there is a favorable environment in order to perform well, right. So, what I mean to say here is that when you are going to analyze performance, make sure that what is the skill base of the individual and what is the behavior, because both of them are going to contribute to the performance, right. Moving further, see what happens. There is another quadrant that I am talking about. It talks about how important it is in terms of low performance and high performance, and in terms of how important it is. It means the significance and importance of the performance, right. Now, if you look at these quadrants, what does it tell you, right. If you look at performance, it means that you are moving from here to high performance, low to high performance, and if you are moving from here to here, then you are talking about low to high, and that is also low to high. So, there are 2 things. Once you are able to analyze the performance, you should be able to say what is there at stake, right. For example, if you think that somebody has done a good job, but it is not important, then what happens, right. But somebody has a bad job, somebody has not been able to do a job which was given to him, though it was very important for the individual as well as organization, because it contributes more. Then what does it mean? You are going to perform very well, and you also find that yes, it is very important and significant. Okay. It means that you have performed very well. So, and that at that level you need to sustain that level of performance. Okay. So, I am talking about quadrant 2, which says high importance and high performance. If you are in that quadrant, then it is good. It means that you are doing the good work and you need to maintain and sustain that level of performance, right. For example, if you look at quadrant 1, okay, what it does, it suggests that you are doing a job, right, which is very important, but your performance is not good. Then it means that is where you need to concentrate, right. You are doing something that is very significant and contribute to your performance, but you have not been able to perform well, right. So, this suggests that this is where you need to concentrate. Now, if you look at quadrant 3, you are doing something which does not contribute well to the performance. So, it is not that important, right. So, whatever you contribute is not recognized and does not contribute, and it is not very significant for the organization. And quadrant 4, if you look at this, right, which talks about you are working in an area doing very well, but that is not very significant for the organization. So, probably you are trying to do so many things, but it is not helping you to improve your performance, or it is not contributing to your performance. So, the idea here is that you need to identify those activities which are not contributing to significantly to your performance, right, and those which are contributing significantly, which have some importance, is being recognized by the organization, right. So, these kind of analysis is also required by the supervisor when he is going to analyze the performance of the individual, that whatever performance level you have achieved, what is the level in terms of whether it is good or bad. Similarly, in what way it is significant and important for the organization and the individual, right. So, if it is doing something that is very significant for the organization, contributes very well, and he is not able to perform well, then that is where you need to concentrate, okay, so that he can move from quadrant 1 to quadrant 2, otherwise there will be a problem, right. Now, this is the flow chart, that is how we proceed when we go for performance analysis, right. So, you are first of all you are going to choose the activity and collect all the data related to the performance, because that is what you are going to do, right. Then moving further, the next thing that you are going to do is that see whether what is the performance level, does actual performance exceed expectations or not. If that is so, you are saying that yes, it is an outstanding performance. So, the answer could be either in yes or no, right. If it is yes, then you have to ask this question whether you are satisfied. If the answer is yes, it means that yes, you have been able to see that yes, this has been achieved, and then you try to find out what are the factors which have facilitated the process. Suppose the answer is no, it means that there has been a gap, right. So, if the performance has not been met, I mean in terms of targets and standards that were achieved, that were to be achieved. If the answer is no, look at this particular point. At this particular point, if the answer is no, it means there are some problems. Now, there are certain things which are within the control of the employees, there are certain things which is beyond the control of the employees. For example, he was not motivated enough to perform. So, that is within the employees, but suppose the environment was not supportive, right. For example, there was a recession in the environment and the sales people are not able to achieve the target, right. So, when you are going to analyze the environment, you are going to see that what are the factors which were within the control and what are the factors which were not within the control of the are beyond the control of the employees, right. So, when you are asking this question whether uncontrollable events, then yes, then you are going to change your strategy and see what needs to be done in order to achieve a satisfactory level of performance, right. So, either you are going to remove those things or you are going to adopt a different strategy, so that you can link it with the performance. Okay. Then you also look at what are the constraints from the organization in terms of environment, not only environment, but also support, resources, commitment from the top management and also from the supervisors. Yes. If that has been there, it is all right. If it is not there, then we will see what needs to be done. Okay. If that happens, it means that they are facilitating factors and they help you to improve your performance, right. If the answer is no, then you are going to ask next question whether you have the skill, ability and knowledge. No, then you go for selection training, It means that you need to select right kind of people or you need to train people because they lack skills in order to perform. But if the answer is yes, then you see that whether they are motivated enough, right. If they are not, then you are going to apply certain motivational techniques, right. If the answer is yes, then where the performance expectations are realistic or not. If not, then you are going to again revise your the expectations that has been set, right. And if the answer is yes, then you are going to change your method, and then you are going to feed this data again to the first one, so that you can see what needs to be done, whether you are going to change your strategy or whether you are going to apply your motivational strategy or you are going to make certain changes in the standards, right. So, this flow chart basically helps you to identify the factors and which are important or factors which are not important, right. Now, what we are going to discuss finally is what are the facilitating and inhibiting factors, right. So, it could be related to the individual, personal or individual factors like his knowledge, skill and behaviors. Then factors related to supervisor, right, support, guidance, leadership, these kind of things, because reporting officer or the supervisor is important contributor. Then we are going to look at the top management and the organization in terms of enabling conditions, culture, climate, what kind of processes and systems have been developed by the organization, whether they are supportive or not. Okay. And finally, we look at the subordinates, whether subordinates were able to help and cooperate with the person or not. And finally, we will look into the external environment, and when we are looking at external environment, we already talked about it, like some of these factors may be beyond the control of the employees. So, you also need to identify, and when you are going to calculate performance, you are going to consider this factor, because if it is beyond the control, then you cannot held responsible employee responsible for this, right. So, we identify facilitating factors. Similarly, we also identify inhibiting factors related to the supervisor, related to the individual, also related to the subordinates, environment and the organization. So, the same factors become either a facilitating factors or inhibiting factors, right, because if there is a lack of knowledge and skill, it could be related to the individual. If we did not provide the guidance, it could be related to the supervisor, right. If subordinates did not cooperate and help, then it could be related to subordinate. If the environment is not supportive, right, then it could be related to the environment, right. So, the same factors related to the reporting officer, supervisor, environment, subordinates and individuals may act either the facilitating factors or inhibiting factors, right. So, from this flow chart we have identified what are the things that we need to do in order to analyze the performance. So, that it would be clear to you, okay. So, these are the factors which have contributed to the performance and these are the factors which have not contributed to the performance. For example, we have taken example of this bank manager and say that these are the KPIs against which his performance is to be evaluated. So, once you have identified performance standards, okay, you are going to measure it and see what are the factors which have contributed. So, you identify the determinants, okay, and then you go for analysis to identify various factors related to various stakeholders and the way they have contributed to the performance. Now, we are taking an example to see that how it can be done. So, if you find that if performance is not good, then you can go for coaching, mentoring and counseling and these kind of activities to ensure that he is able to plan and improve his performance very well, right. And you also see that okay, where the employees are not agreeing with your data, right. So, during the counseling you can see that in what way they can better understand the things, right. Because once you are able to identify inhibiting factors, probably you are making individual aware about what are the areas which needs improvement, right. And that is why sometimes you need to counsel people in specifically when you are going to identify those factors which have not supported the performance, especially inhibiting factors. And then you make aware especially to the employees, look at these are the factors which have supported, these are the factors which have not supported. Okay. So, that he is able to understand the entire performance analysis process and he is able to know that okay, where does he stand, why he has achieved this level of performance, what are the factors which have contributed and what needs to be done by him, right. And then you can also identify the development needs of the people. Once you are able to analyze and you know okay, these are the factors, then you can plan okay, whether you are going for selection, whether you are going for training, whether you are going to motivate, it depends upon what is his performance level and how significant that is, that we have already talked about, right. So, you also need to identify if there is a lack of knowledge and skill, what kind of competencies he has to develop. If you find that person is not motivated and interested, then you can go for a training program or these kind of things. Suppose you find that his communication is not good, his relationship with the people is not good. So, you can go for a training program on interpersonal relationship and communication, which would improve his performance. So, you need to identify competencies related to knowledge and skill and also to the behavior. Once you are able to identify them, then you can identify the development plan for the individual, right, and that is how you can use this for development needs, right. So, here we have taken one example of a branch manager, since we have been discussing about it. So, these are the factors that have been identified, facilitating factors and also inhibiting factors, okay, related to the individual, right, reporting officer, organization, subordinate and the external environment, and the same factors are going to contribute as inhibiting factors. So, once you are going to use this and you have the data in your hand of the performance on those criteria like deposit mobilization, revenue generation, customer satisfaction, leadership. So, see that on these KPIs what is his performance and which factor is responsible for what kind of say performance. Say for example, you say the leadership. So, leadership has helped in what? Good administration or not, whether his knowledge and skill base has been able to help the bank to generate more revenue or not. Okay. So, you need to relate these factors with the KPIs. Simply identifying facilitating factors would not be enough, okay. But you also need to link these factors with the KPIs. So, that the person who is being analyzed, especially his performance that is being analyzed, he will be in a better position to understand what led to this performance related to each of these KPIs. So, that he is, when you are going to have a development plan for the individual, you will be in a better position, right. So, see some of the factors that have been identified here related to, like for example, if you look at the facilitating factors related to the individual, like his perseverance, okay, soberness, ability to motivate the staff, or interest in the bank, or he is a good learner, okay, and he provide timely support. It is related to the individual. It means that these are behavioral competencies which facilitated good performance, right. Similarly, if you look at these inhibiting factors, you can find out, okay, so there are certain factors like lack of confidence, not good communication, you are not getting good cooperation from the staff. So, some of these factors which could be inhibiting factors. Once you are able to analyze these factors, simply relate it with each of these KPIs, so that you will be able to find out which factor is related to which KPI, and then accordingly you are going to develop the action plan for that. Okay. Thank you very much.